Hello, 5th graders. Welcome to Lesson 9.1, Line Plots. Please pause to write the lesson number and title in your notebook. Today's lesson objective is to make and use line plots with fractions to solve problems. Please pause again to write the lesson objective in your notebook. All right, 5th graders, let's begin today's lesson by reading the Unlock the Problem. It says, students have measured different amounts of water into beakers for an experiment. The amount of water in each beaker is listed below, and you can see we have a list of data. 1/4, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, 1/4, so on. Underneath we have a question. If the total amount of water stayed the same, what would the average amount of water in a beaker be? So the average would mean about the middle. So in order to find the middle of something, we're going to need to follow the steps on this page and create a graph of our data. Step 1 says count the number of cups for each amount. Draw an X for the number of times the amount is recorded to complete the line plot. So first off, we have 1/4. So let's look at how many 1/4s we have. I'm going to go ahead and circle them. So I have one here, and here, and here. So find everything that says 1/4. Okay, so it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 1/4s. Okay, now let's look at how many 1/2s we have. We have 1, 2, that's it. We have 2 1/2s, and then 3/4. 3/4, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we're going to use this to continue the diagram, the graph, up in the top right corner. So above the 1/4, you can see that they've started. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 X's, but we need 7. So I'm going to continue on 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, in the 1/2 we have 2, so I'm going to draw 2. And then above the 3/4 we have 3, and they've already drawn 1, so I'm going to draw 2 more. So my graph should look like this. Remember, if my graph looks like this, your graph needs to look like this as well. Okay, step 2 says find the total number of water in all the beakers that contain 1/4 cup of water. Well, we know that there are 7 beakers with 1/4 cup of water. So that would mean that there are 7/4. So we could write that as 7 over 4, or we know that 4 goes into 7 one time with 3 leftover parts. So we could write that as 1 and 1/4. So what we did is we added 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 7 times. Or we could multiply 7 times 1/4. That's where we got that 7/4. Let's go to step 2 and practice this skill again. Step 2 says, find the total number of water in all the beakers that contain 1/2. Well, we counted 2 beakers that had 1/2, so there are 2 halves. And again, we could write this as 2 times 1/2, which would give us 2 halves, or 1 cup. Step 4 says find the total number of water in all the beakers that contain 3/4. We had 3 of them, so like I showed you, that's 3 times 3/4, and remember we multiply straight across the top, so 3 times 3 is 9/4, and 4 goes into 9 2 times, which is 8, with 1/4 left over. Now step 5 says we want to take all of those totals that we found, the 1 and 3/4 from step 2, the 2 halves from step 3, the 2 and 1/4 from step 4, and add them together. So step 5 says add the total amounts. So if we change 2 over 2 into a 1, then we have common denominators. So let's add these numbers. Well, if I add 3/4 and 1/4, that gives me 1 whole. Plus 2, plus the 1 that's there, plus 1 more, so that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So adding all together, I get the number 5. Now, in order to find the average, that means about the middle, we want to know what would be our total divided by the number of beakers that we had, or the number of x's in our graph. So we're going to do 5 divided by 12. And 12 doesn't go into 5 evenly, so we can write this as a fraction, 5/12. And that's as simple as that can get, because 5 and 12 don't share anything in common. So the average is 5/12. Great job so far, 5th graders. Let's continue on. The example says, Rain divides 3 2-ounce bags of rice into smaller bags. The first bag is divided into bags weighing 1/6 ounce. The second bag is divided into bags weighing 1/3 ounce. And the third bag is divided into bags weighing 1/2 ounce. And then here's our question. Find the number of 1/6, 1/3, and 1/2 ounces of bags. Graph your results on the line plot. Step 1 says we need to give our line plot a name. So it says it should describe what we are counting. Well, we are counting bags of rice, and we are looking at ounces. So we are going to write the weight of rice bags. Okay, step 2 says we're going to label 1/6, 1/3, and 1/2 on the plot line so that we know the different amounts. So they did that for us, 1/6, 1/3, 1/2, they're written on the line. And now we're going to use some division to find the number of 1/6, 1/3, and 1/2 bags that are made so that we can graph them. So the first thing we have is 2 divided by 1/6. Remember that we want to use the keep, flip, change method. So 2 times 6, flip it upside down, is 12. Okay, now the same thing with 2 times 1/3. If we take 1/3 and we flip it upside down, 2 times 3 is 6. And lastly, 2 divided by 1/2. So we keep, flip, change, and that would change 1/2 into a 2, and 2 times 2 is 4. So now let's go ahead and add those x's to our line plot. So above the 1/6, we have 12 x's. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, above the 1/3, we have 6 x's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And above the 1/2, we have 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now it says that we are going to, step 4 says draw your x's, and we already did that. So we are all done with this one. We did not need to find the average like we did in example 1. Alright, 5th graders, if you look above the example, there's a section that says try this. We're going to use that try this section as our lesson activity today. You can go ahead and do it on your lesson pages. You do not need to write it in your math notebook. It says, you can use order of operations to find the average. Solve the problem as a series of expressions that use parentheses and brackets to separate them. Perform operations from inside the parentheses to the outer brackets. So you can see we have this long string of fractions and numbers that we have to deal with. So if we look inside the brackets, I see 7 times 1/4 plus 2 times 1/2 plus 3 times 3/4 divided by 12. So let's start by solving each operation inside the parentheses. So first off, 7 times 1/4. 7 times 1 is 7, and then 4 goes on the bottom. 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 over 2 equals 1. Then 3 times 3 equals 9, and the bottom number stays the same, 4. So now let's add all of our fractions together. So if we had 7 plus 9, we get 16 fourths. And 4 goes into 16 4 times, plus that whole number 1 that's in the middle. That gives us 5. Then we would say 5 divided by 12. And again, this is from that first problem. So what should be our fractional answer? Go ahead and fill this in, and we'll talk about it at the teacher table. Great job, 5th graders.